All right. Thank you all so much for taking time to be here. I know that many of you are probably joining from overseas as you're studying abroad, so I appreciate you taking time out of your evening or morning, whatever time it might be where you are. In case we haven't met before, my name is Jason Jeffrey, and I am the Associate Director of Fellowships. So I serve the college as the sole administrator who is responsible for assisting students and alumni apply for external awards. I have been in this role now for a little over 6 years, so this upcoming cycle will be my seventh, which is hard to believe. And during that time, I have worked with a number of successful Pomona applicants for UK awards, including the Marshall and the Churchill, the Gates Cambridge. We had a Rhodes recipient last year, and also several finalists for these awards too. So this session is intended to provide a somewhat in-depth overview of the UK scholarship space, the different awards that are available, as well as Pomona's internal processes for applying. If you have questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and I'll certainly make time after the session is over if you'd like to unmute yourself. So, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, this may be plainly obvious, but when we talk about UK awards, what do we mean? Well, we are referring to scholarships that will fund postgraduate study in the United Kingdom. So typically degrees, but there are a few awards that will also support a PhD or a DPhil. So most commonly, people pursue a UK award to pursue a 1 or sometimes 2 year master's degree, and occasionally a PhD in the UK. Uh, you may not know this, but most master's degree programs in the UK and indeed in many parts of the world are only 1 year. So you can actually complete a master's in that amount of time. The 2 year option is often reserved for what are called MPhils, or research-focused degrees, at the conclusion of which you produce a master's dissertation. So a very, very long research paper. And the DPhil degree actually also has a shorter normative degree time than in the US. It's typically 3 to 4 years to complete a PhD. So to be competitive for a UK scholarship, and they are exceedingly competitive, applicants must demonstrate high academic achievement, typically a 3.7 or above. Though I'd say for the ultra competitive awards like Marshall and Rhodes, most finalists and recipients typically have a 3.9. Now, I say that not to deter or discourage people from applying if you have lower than that, because it is a very holistic review process, but that historically has been the case. Many of those awards, though, are not just looking for great students, but also those that have demonstrated leadership. And when we talk about leadership and fellowships, we're really talking about impact, demonstrated impact, that you can point to a situation and say, that result wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken the initiative and gotten involved. So it doesn't have to be necessarily holding titles or positions of leadership. You don't have to be involved in ASPC. It's that you made some sort of demonstrative change in the things that you were involved in. Again, these awards are really competitive, especially Marshall and Rhodes, but not impossible. And Pomona has a great track record with UK awards across the spectrum. Um, so, they're definitely worth considering if you meet that minimum GPA requirement. Just about the only thing that these scholarships will not support is professional degrees. And that is typically because professional degrees need to be earned in the country where you intend to practice, because there are usually different credentialing requirements, such as particularly with an MD or a JD. So you usually don't want to pursue a professional degree in the UK unless you're planning to live there and practice there in the future. So given that these awards are so competitive, why should you apply? Well, I would encourage you to think about UK awards and indeed really all fellowships on two different dimensions. First, as an opportunity, so what you get if you're successful. And with UK awards, obviously, it's a really cool experience. I mean, one of our Marshall recipients way back in 2019, the first one I worked with, wasn't intending to pursue UK awards, but two professors mentioned that he might be a good candidate, and he thought, what an amazing opportunity. It's kind of like study abroad. Like, when else do you have the opportunity to go and earn a master's degree in the UK from maybe one of the world's top universities and have it completely subsidized by a scholarship? More practically, a lot of people pursue UK awards because they want to develop some sort of subject matter expertise or maybe technical expertise before pursuing their terminal degree program. So before going into typically a PhD or maybe a JD or MD. So some MD bound students may want to pursue a UK degree because they want to bone up on bench work and they want to be a physician scientist. Some JD bound students may want to gain expertise in the field that they hope to practice in. That was actually true of the Marshall recipient that I was just mentioning. He wanted to get involved in election law, so he pursued a degree at LSE in election law. Um, and given, again, the shorter normative degree time, it's great because you can earn that master's and develop that expertise in a relatively short period of time. And yeah, I'm not going to lie that the prestige of earning one of these awards does open doors. Someone in the fellowships community has named this the Matthew effect, that those who receive awards tend to receive more awards in the future. So success essentially breeds success. But obviously, never should you pursue these awards just because of the prestige. Your application is just not going to be very compelling. You can usually see right through that. So, having said that, I'd also encourage you to think about these awards as a process. So, what you get, even if you're not successful. First of all, it's a chance to reflect on yourself. I'm guessing that most of you are probably juniors, soon to be rising seniors, and you've been very busy. Pomona's a demanding curriculum. There are a lot of extracurriculars that students get involved in. So maybe you haven't had a chance to think about yourself, what you've gained during your time here at Pomona, and what your future goals are. And fellowships applications will force you to do that. So it's a really useful thought exercise. You'll also more concretely develop writing, you'll develop verbiage, and potentially, if you're a finalist, interviewing skills that you can apply to any application. So, you really do get better at applying for things if you pursue a fellowship. Those of you thinking about terminal degrees, maybe applying for terminal degrees, in the same cycle that you're pursuing fellowships, you'll essentially just be front loading the work. So if you're pursuing a Marshall or Rhodes and you're also going to pursue a PhD, you'll develop a lot of the writing and materials that you'll need for those other applications. So it's not really a question of what if I don't get this, but even if I don't get this, you're still going to gain a lot of value through the process. I guarantee you that. All right, let's get into the awards. So beginning with, and I don't know why I begin with this, but I think because it's one of the more popular awards for Pomona students, the Marshall Scholarship. So it's funded through the UK government, and it supports 1 or more commonly 2 years of study in the UK. And that can be at a single institution, it can be at two institutions. So you can pursue up to two master's degrees through the Marshall Scholarship. They also have a DPhil option. So if that's something that you're seriously considering, there is a 3rd year extension of the scholarship if you're going that route. It is only available to US citizens, and there are 3 pillars to the criteria: scholastic achievement, which they define as a 3.7 minimum GPA. Leadership, again, I talked about impact, and that's really what they're looking for. And in fact, the application asks applicants to share an anecdote describing a situation in which they delivered some sort of demonstrable impact. And then enhance relations between the US and the UK. We call this the ambassadorial component. And applicants have to speak to that both in terms of how they're going to get involved in university life as a scholar and engage with UK students, and also beyond that in their career and the ways in which that they can develop linkages between the two countries. They select up to 45 scholars each year. You can apply up to 2 years after graduation, so you don't have to apply as a senior. And Pomona has been relatively, for a school of our size, very successful with Marshall. We've had two recent-ish recipients in 2019 and 2021. We had an alternate this past year, and we've had multiple finalists. In fact, in the 6 cycles that I've been doing this, there have been 2 years in which we haven't had a finalist. So Pomona is definitely a known entity with the Marshall Scholarship. Oh, sorry. Go back here. Okay. So the Rhodes Scholarship. I'm guessing most of you have probably heard of the Rhodes. It's the oldest academic exchange program between the US and the UK. It funds 2 years in any degree program, any postgraduate degree program at Oxford. And it is 2 years minimum. But there is also, like Marshall, a DPhil extension, third-year extension. Rhodes is an international scholarship. It used to be strictly between the US and the UK, but they have since opened the competition by creating what they call constituencies for other countries, typically Commonwealth or former Commonwealth countries. Um, so the constituencies, though, just if you're an international student, have separate deadlines and application procedures. Most of the constituencies do not require campus endorsement, so they're direct apply. But for the US applicants, is very much an endorsed award, and I'll talk about that process a little bit after we get through the other awards. The criteria is I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's long and kind of in this somewhat archaic language, but essentially boils down to scholastic achievement, again, a 3.7 minimum GPA, broadly concerned for others. So whatever you're planning to do, you need to talk about kind of the societal benefit of it. And then leadership, which for Rhodes, I think is both quantity and quality. So they like to see the demonstration of impact, but they also like to see that you've taken leadership roles in other things that you've done. Um, and one misnomer about the Rhodes or misconception about the Rhodes is that they're not really looking for STEM students, that it's for more humanities and social sciences. And that's not true at all. So they are absolutely open to STEM students, and they recognize that STEM students often don't have the time to be involved in extracurriculars. So they're going to look for leadership within your field, within the labs that you've been a part of, and REUs and other kinds of maybe research experiences. Numerically, they recruit 32 US scholars. That's been historically true since its founding. But then anywhere from 1 to 11 recipients per international constituency, totaling about 100 scholars per year. Rhodes, unfortunately, has this weird numerical limit on when you can apply. So whereas Marshall, it's 2 years after you graduate, Rhodes, it's you can't be older than 24 at the time of graduation, which I don't like, but it is what it is. And Pomona, over the course of its history, has had 13 Rhodes Scholars, including one from last year. I don't know if you knew Shark, but she received a Rhodes for the Kenya constituency. And every year since I've been here, we generally have at least one finalist. Sorry. Okay. So Gates Cambridge. Gates Cambridge is a newer award. It came online in the mid 2000s. Um, Judging by its name, you can tell it's specifically for the University of Cambridge, and it funds any postgraduate degree in any field. However, they are more interested in PhD candidates because they're looking to provide leadership development and other kind of co-curricular programming. So they want people to remain at Cambridge for ideally a longer than just a year. They will support a single master's degree, and Pomona's had at least one, probably more recipients for the 1 year master's. But your odds are better if you pursue a DPhil. So there are two competition timelines, one for US applicants, one for international applicants. The US process happens earlier. The deadline's usually mid-October. International applicants is typically beginning of December, beginning of January, depending on which course you're pursuing. There's no age limit for the Gates, so anytime it's right for you, you can apply. Gates is more of a straightforward academic scholarship, so they prioritize fit with your degree program, academic excellence. Leadership is one of the criterion. Again, I think their leadership and potential for leadership in your field, not necessarily outside of it. And there does need to be some kind of societal benefit to whatever field you're planning to pursue, and you have to articulate that in your essay. They only select about 25 to 30 US recipients every year, at a total cohort of about 100. What is unique about Gates and makes it very accessible is that you apply for the scholarship through the graduate application for Cambridge. So it's a very easy process. You just click a box that you're interested in financial aid, you click the box for Gates, and you have to complete one 500-word essay. And there's one additional reference that's required for the Gates scholarship. You only need two for the Cambridge graduate application. And Pomona has been pretty successful. We've had 8 recipients, including in 2022, and this is US recipients in 2022 and 2024, and a host of finalists. All right. Churchill Scholarship. So this is the only one that is discipline specific. It only supports 1 year of graduate training in a STEM field. So they're not open to other disciplines. Uh, it is only open to US citizens. And this is very much an academic scholarship. So they are focused on academics and research achievement, namely publications and presentations. I would also just mention, not to discourage, but just to inform that most of our previous Churchill recipients have been Goldwater recipients. So people who display a high level of research achievement. They select up to 16 scholars per year. You can apply up to 1 year after graduation, so you don't have to apply senior year. And we have been incredibly successful with Churchill, again, for a school of our size. We've had 9 winners since 2007, including 2022, 2023, and this past competition. Oh, and just briefly, I was going to mention that they offer one award called the Churchill Candor Scholarship in Science Policy. So the intention being that they want people who are probably going to go on to get a PhD in a STEM field to take a year and earn a policy degree so that they learn how to communicate with policymakers, and try to bridge that divide between those producing scientific inquiry, and those who are using that information then to base it upon public policy. The Downing Scholarship. So I don't know if you've heard of this one, but Downing is Pomona's exchange program with Downing College, Cambridge. But it will support any 1 year postgraduate degree at Cambridge. You are just housed at Downing College. Um, all Pomona seniors are eligible regardless of citizenship status. And we are able to select 2 recipients per year who receive a full ride to Cambridge for, again, a 1 year master's degree. So it's a remarkable opportunity for Pomona students. Obviously, the odds are far better for the Downing than they are for a Marshall or a Rhodes. And the criteria, again, I classify Downing more as a traditional academic scholarship. Most of the focus is on fit with preparation for your graduate program. A lot of emphasis is placed on the relevance of the degree to future plans. Why do you actually need a degree from Cambridge, from the UK? And a little bit of emphasis is on potential contributions to Downing. So you're not just going to sit in your room and do your work. You're actually going to get engaged with the college. The competition has got a little stiffer the last couple of years. This past year in particular, we saw a jump in applicants from about 30, 31 to 41. But again, still far better odds than national scholarship competitions. And finally, this is kind of a bonus award that you may not have heard of before. It's called the Ertegun Scholarship. It is in some ways similar to the Gates Cambridge. It's specific to Oxford, though it's discipline specific, so it's only for the humanities, but it will fund any postgraduate degree in the humanities. And also, like the Gates, you apply for the Erdogan as you're submitting your graduate application for Oxford. So it's built into it. It's just one 500-word essay. I don't even think it requires an additional reference. So very easy to apply for. It is super competitive. It has about a 2 or 3% success rate. But if you're applying to Oxford anyway, then why not toss your hat in the ring? There is no age or citizenship requirement. It's very much a straightforward academic scholarship. So if your academic department thinks you're awesome, then you're probably going to be a strong fit for this. The only award 15 per year. But Pomona did have a recipient in 2018. We may have others I don't know about, but the recipient from 2018 actually contacted me and said, "Hey, Pomona students really need to know about this. This is a great opportunity. Not only do you get your education paid for, but apparently there's an Erdogan house and you get a desk at this house where you can work," which I guess is a big deal if you're a graduate student at Oxford. So I know there's a lot of information to take in if you're new to these awards. I think it's helpful to think about them as kind of existing on a continuum between those that are predominantly academic. They're looking at strong academic research profiles, and those are looking for academics plus leadership and initiative. So Churchill, I can tell you that when I first started, I had a conversation with the executive director for Churchill, and he just straight up said, "Look, a lot of these awards are looking for leadership and involvement and being involved with associated students and whatnot. We don't care about that. We're looking for strong grades and research output." Like, okay, well, that's clear. And you know if you're a good fit for that or not. But on the other end, as I mentioned, Marshall Rhodes in particular is looking for deep sort of involvement, leadership. Um, I'd say a demonstrated commitment to the area that you plan to go into or the problem that you hope to solve in the future. And then Downing and Gates are kind of somewhere in between. For those of you who are international students on the call, these are the four awards that are available to you. So past recipients, I'm not going to go through, excuse me, all of these, but just to give you a sense of who has received these awards, and what their profile was like. I'll maybe highlight Nina, whose picture is in the top left, and our most recent Marshall recipient. So Nina is an English major, and had taken several creative writing courses. She had actually written a young adult novel that she was shopping around to publishers. And she developed this interest in writing the body, a kind of medical lit, um, and discovered a gap in the literature. It's kind of amazing related to gastrointestinal issues that no one was writing about this in her field. And so she intended to pursue that. And her genre was something called auto theory, so autobiographical, but also mixing, I think, critical and literary theory. So her course of study made perfect sense that she wanted to pursue a degree in literary studies, um, and creative and critical writing. So literary studies to bone up on her theory, and the second course to provide an opportunity to actually work on her next creative project. So you can kind of see, and also I mentioned this too, that the UK apparently, I didn't know this until I read her application, creative writing programs and lit programs coexist pretty much in the same department. One grew out of the other. I think the creative writing grew out of the lit programs. Whereas in America, they're really separated. Um, there's like this kind of hard divide between the two. So that was another compelling reason for her pursuing her postgraduate degrees in the UK. Let's see. So down here, Sophie in the bottom left was our last Gates Cambridge recipient, at least last to accept the award. And she pursued a PhD in zoology, and her focus was on pollinators. And she had this great project worked out of how the green spaces in the UK promoted pollinator health and activity. So that was, I think, going to be the focus of her dissertation or her DPhil thesis. So again, there was kind of a compelling reason for why she needed to go to UK to do that work. All right, let's get into the process. So many of you have probably seen the emails that I sent out recently about Marshall and Rhodes and the endorsement deadline of April 13th. Churchill is also an endorsed award. And what this means is that you have to apply to Pomona first before you can enter the national competitions. So there is an internal deadline. Um, and what you submit by that date is going to vary by award. For Marshall and Rhodes, we have concocted this internal application that's kind of an abbreviated version of the Marshall and Rhodes applications. Other endorsement processes may require a draft of the actual scholarship application, such as the Churchill. But the point is that you got to pay attention to that internal deadline and make sure you get everything in by then. You'll then compete against Pomona students, sometimes alums, often through interviews for the college's nomination. And you'll find the deadlines and the processes all on our fellowship website. So all of that link there. So it's the endorsed fellowships through Pomona site. So if you Google that, it'll take you to it as well. With respect to Marshall and Rhodes, I get often asked, is there a numerical limit to how many people Pomona can nominate? And there is for Marshall, but it's 24. And I don't think Pomona's ever going to have 24 applicants for Marshall. Um, Rose doesn't have a limit, but the question really is who is a viable candidate? Who is ready for the projects that they outline? Um, we have limited institutional resources at Pomona. I'm one person. And we want to make sure that the nominees for those two awards in particular receive the time and attention necessary to really develop the most competitive, compelling applications possible. So because of that, we do, obviously limit the number of people who we endorse. Um, but there's no technical limit. And we've had as many, I think, as like 15, and we've had as few as four. No, three actually my first year, although the pool was only nine. Um, so that's a little bit about that. Churchill does have a hard limit of two applicants. And obviously, as I mentioned before with Downing, we could only support two seniors each year. So if you have any questions to that, just let me know, drop something in the chat. We can certainly talk about it through an in-person appointment as well. Okay, so related to Marshall and Rhodes. Again, the deadline is April 13th to apply for endorsement. There is an internal form. It lives on SurveyMonkey Apply, which is the same site that the PSIP application is on. Um, there will be a very kind of high level screening process just to make sure the applicants meet the minimum GPA and have at least some of the leadership qualities that Marshall and Rhodes is looking for. And nearly, I'd say probably all applicants will receive an interview with the selection committee, which is composed of faculty at Pomona. So every year there are, gosh, this year we had, I think, 8 faculty who were assigned as UK awards advisors. And this is actually their service requirement for the year. And their job is to help applicants apply for these awards. So while in fall, they're helping applicants develop their application materials. and also select for the Downing Scholarship. In the spring, they serve as the committee for the endorsement process for Marshall and Rhodes. So there will at least be 4 or 5 faculty involved in that process from different disciplines. If you're selected, then you work with me for the first part of the summer to talk about your narrative, your goals, how to research UK universities, maybe start developing some materials, and then I'll hand you off to one of the faculty advisors that'll be selected for next year, and they'll work with you to review drafts of materials and really refine them. So it's a very high touch process. Lastly, in terms of process, we also offer something called a preliminary application. This is a pre-application for those interested in UK awards. It's not a binding commitment, it's not a blood oath. You can change your mind about which awards you want to pursue or don't pursue any at all. But the intent is to get applicants thinking and researching and writing early in the summer for those scholarship applications. The main benefit probably for this in the students' minds is that they will be assigned one of those UK award faculty advisors who can assist them with applying for different scholarships in the fall. And the deadline for that this year is July 15th, so you don't really have to worry about this. Just kind of file it away in your brain. But by that date, hopefully you've at least researched some degree programs in the UK that you're seriously interested in and thought about your why. What's the rationale for this? Why does this make sense for me? So, on that note, the rationale for pursuing a UK award usually boils down to the choice of degree or degrees. So I strongly encourage you to spend a lot of time researching different degree options. Don't just look at the brand name, Golden Triangle schools in London and Oxford and Cambridge, but look outside of that too, because each university is known for certain things. And it could be that the University of Bath is a better fit than Cambridge. So do your due diligence and thankfully, Pomona has a website to assist you with that. So we have a site called Researching British Universities with links to different resources. The British Council's study site is kind of like the official site for graduate programs in the UK. The Marshall Scholarship also has a course finder that's very handy. You can just plug in what field you're interested in, and it will provide options. There's also not, I'm not endorsing any of these, but a third-party site called findamasters.com. That's anywhere in the world, but particularly they have a lot of, I think they cover just about every program in the UK. And if you're not sure what university, but you're interested in particular kind of research, you could kind of reverse engineer the process by going to the UK Research and Innovation site and looking what research is being funded in your field, and then looking for the faculty, the PIs conducting that research and seeing where they teach. Um, so this is often a useful way to go about it, and they fund research across all disciplines. So you might want to take a gander at the research and innovation site, and also get a sense of kind of if there are themes to what they're supporting. Um, and that could be useful in terms of creating your rationale of, well, the UK is funding this, they're devoting resources to this field, the US is not, or maybe they're doing it in ways the US isn't, and so it'd be really useful for me to engage in that. Obviously, you want to ultimately look at the course listings on university websites, but I think most importantly, just talk to people in your field. Talk to the subject matter experts. A lot of faculty at Pomona have pursued postgraduate degrees in the UK, so they can no doubt maybe direct you to specific programs, maybe even specific faculty within those programs. Just a quick note for those of you who are STEM majors, it is very common to uh, which is very common. How do I phrase this? So often to apply for a STEM graduate program, particularly a research graduate program, you need to identify your program supervisor before you apply. So if you're planning to pursue a research degree, It's normally expected that you contact a couple of faculty members and generally get one saying that they're willing to be your supervisor if you get admitted and if you get funding. And that's just through cold emailing. The university professors expect that in the UK, so don't be hesitant. Um, and that's also useful too, because then if you're pursuing a research degree, you have to present a dissertation or final project. And that prospective supervisor can help you craft that. So that's kind of an important distinction for STEM majors. Okay, timeline. I know we're almost out of time here. Um, Spring. So I'm glad you're all here. I'm glad you're all exploring these opportunities now. It takes a lot of time to develop a competitive proposal, so keep doing what you're doing. Talk to people. I'd say before the end of the term, if you definitely intend to pursue a UK scholarship, talk to potential recommenders and let them know that and when their letters will be due. Again, the nomination deadline for Marshall and Rhodes, again, Rhodes US, not international constituencies, is April 13th. Summer, the preliminary application deadline, July 15th. Summer is generally when you're going to develop application materials. Depends on which award you're pursuing. If it's Churchill, Gates, Downing, you usually can wait till you come back to campus. Although you probably want to research programs, your graduate courses over the summer and have those lined up. Because again, that's often the most time consuming part of this. Yeah, requesting letters of recommendation, give your recommenders at least a month minimum to produce those letters. And fall is deadline season, so Marshall and Rhodes. Marshall's deadline's the third week of September. Rhodes is the first week of October. Uh, Churchill, Gates, Downing are all in October in that order. And then for international applicants for Gates, Cambridge, again, the deadlines are December and January. So real quick, before you take off, I just wanted to share some wisdom from being the administrator of these programs for so many years. First is begin early. No, I mean really early. Again, give yourself 3 to 5 months before national deadlines to develop your applications. And again, particularly identify your courses of study. Think really careful about fit. Think carefully about fit about not just graduate programs, but also with scholarships. They all have kind of a different personality and they're all looking for slightly different profiles. So while I encourage students to shoot their shot and you're going to gain a lot of value from the process, and a lot of people who pursue UK awards will apply to multiple in a single cycle. Um, you may have a sense that maybe one award is a better fit for you. So yeah, again, just think carefully about that. Again, talk to faculty early about letters of rec and make sure you equip them to write a compelling rec. Most faculty are going to ask for a draft of your application materials before they write it, so you need to produce that probably well before the national deadline. But you might have to educate the faculty member about the award and what the criteria is and who they're looking for and what specifically to highlight from your background. So do consider that when you're requesting recs. Be strategic about your story. So all these applications are going to require essays, multiple essays in the case of a few awards, such as Marshall it's a long application. There are really four essays, ranging from I think 800 to 500 words. So I understand that most of you are 21, 20. You likely don't know exactly what you're going to do in the future. That's perfectly fine. No one expects you to. But what the awards do expect is that you present a mission. So there's some problem in the world that you feel kind of called to address. And that's really the North Star from the application is that everything I'm doing, all the preparation, these scholarships, being in the UK is leading me towards the goal of being able to substantively work on this particular issue. So you don't need to know necessarily every step in your trajectory, although I think it's helpful to plot out, at least, sketch out what that might look like. Maybe some examples of organizations doing the work that you're interested in. But you don't have to have, again, every step plotted out in great detail. But the mission is very important. Definitely provide a clear rationale for the grad programs. Again, the mission being the North Star. You want to think carefully about how these programs are going to help prepare you for that, what kind of skills and knowledge you're going to gain, and where you do it too. That could be a factor. You might want to consider Northern Ireland for whatever reason. I was actually talking to someone the other day who thinks they're going to pursue a degree in Northern Ireland because they're interested in borders and migration. And obviously, Northern Ireland's a city where they have a physical border. So, yeah, just be very thoughtful about that. But there needs to be, again, a really pretty compelling reason for going to the UK for your graduate work. Your applications should contain logos, ethos, and pathos. So, good old Aristotle's three components of compelling writing. Logos being the rationale, the logic, why this makes sense, given your plans, given what you've done before. Ethos being credentialing. So here's the ways in which I developed my expertise to date. And pathos, don't forget the pathos, which is why do you care about this? So you often need a little bit of an origin story of how you became interested in your particular field, why it matters to you, and also why it should matter to the reviewers. So what's the point? Is it generally can't just be advancing the field. There has to be some kind of larger societal gain from what you intend to do in the future. And then obviously get feedback. So, everyone has their own editorial process. I don't like to solicit feedback from too many people because you get contradictory feedback. Some people like that. Some people like to offer their drafts widely and then they can filter out the useful information. So whatever works for you, but make sure you get people to review your applications, particularly subject matter experts. So hopefully you're also working with a faculty member or PI in your field, in addition to, if you submit the preliminary application, one of the UK awards faculty. So that's all I have. In case you're interested in also Fulbright, because Fulbright will support 1 year degrees in the UK as well as research in the UK. I'll be offering two information sessions on Fulbright, one on March 31st, which will be in person, and then one on April 15th, which will be virtual. So I encourage you to attend those if you're considering Fulbright as well. Again, the fellowship's website is listed there. You're always welcome to schedule an appointment with me, no matter what stage you are in and thinking about these opportunities. Whether you're just becoming aware of them for the first time or you'd like a final pair of eyes on your application materials, I'm here to support